Hello and welcome to the TPC podcast. I'm your host, James Lapine, coming to you once again live from the Paradox Studios. This is our 6th live episode, and I'm joined this week by our Director of Spiritual Formation, Joel Saurez. What's up, dude?
Not much, man.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
we've also got Reid Monaghan on the Zoom call today, so he'll be our guest. He is the founder of powerofchange.org. What's up, Reid?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good, man. Glad you're here with us. We are going to spend most of our time talking with you, but as is the case, we like to start these off with a local business shout out. During these pandemic times, we're trying to do everything that we can to support local and to love Fort Worth. And so we had to have Joel on the show this week because he's repping with the hoodie.
That's right, man.
Check that thing out, man. Panther City hoodie.
Yeah, dude.
Where'd you get that thing?
Fort Worth locals, man.
Where's that?
They're on Magnolia, and they're having a sale on
Okay.
hoodies, and I'm sure that's because it's getting hot. Also, probably trying to get rid of stuff.
Getting rid of their winter stuff, yeah.
Yeah, man. So it's good stuff. It's cheap too. Right now.
So did you go to the store?
No,
Okay.
I didn't. But online.
Online, and then they deliver it to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shipped it. I think it was free shipping, and got it it was super quick too, man.
Nice.
Good.
Okay. So support local. Jordan's going to link that up in the comments. Do you know their website? Yeah, it's in the comments.
I'm sure it is.
Find it in the comments. Support local, and check out the hoodies that they've got for sale right now. If you are in the comments, let us know. We want to know that you're watching. We know that lots of you join us to watch live, and so we're glad that you're here, and would love to hear from you. If you have any questions for us this week, hopefully you know by now, but our topic today is kind of what evangelism looks like in the midst of a pandemic. And so if you've been at home and wondering, how can I care for people? How can I share the gospel? How can I be reaching out when everybody is telling me to stay at home and leave well enough alone? We would love to talk about those questions with you today. But before we get into that topic, this is really, I know I said it last week that this was my final reminder, but this is my actual final reminder. And that is about Stories and Songs, which is this Friday in 2 days at 7 p.m. And so I've joked before, but I mean it. I know you don't have any plans on Friday night. So go ahead and put it on your calendar and join us at 7 p.m. to hear the stories that God has been writing in our people over the past several months in this cycle of our redemption groups. Join us to be encouraged by those. Join us to sing songs to God, thanking Him for what He's done. We would love to see you online at 7 p.m. Just go to theparadoxchurch.com, and you can watch there. We'll also be live on YouTube and Facebook, and so join us Friday night. We can't wait to see you for that. We wish we could be together, but since we can't, this is our next best option. And so we'll see you this Friday night, 7 p.m., Stories and Songs. Okay, that's it for this week. That was probably the quickest housekeeping section we've had so far, but that's good because it means we get more time with Reid talking about evangelism in a COVID-19 world. And so, Reid, this is my first time talking with you, and I'm sure that people listening may not be familiar with you or your organization. And so, man, if you could just give us the quick story of who you are, where you come from, and how you got to do what you're doing now, I'd love it.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me, and it's always good to connect with the Paradox. One of the things I have preached at the Paradox Church and have done a training there, so I know a few of you guys, but
Okay.
a little bit of an update. My background was in campus ministry. I was a college athlete. I wrestled at the University of North Carolina and then worked with varsity athletes for 8 years before going into pastoral ministry, which I did for about 12. Most of that was planting churches in the northeastern United States, and I started one church and then Acts 29 New Jersey, served on a Northeast leadership team for a while. And then in 2016, we transitioned to start our own organization called Power of Change, where we're just focused on trying to impact and influence the coming generation and kind of post-Christendom Western civilization. So I work with folks that are influential to young people. So parents, pastors, church planters, good emphasis on men and dads. And then I'm also active in speaking to young people. I'll speak on university campuses several times a year, well, at least before the virus hit, as well as thinking through how do we engage thoughtfully with people in culture. So a little bit of Christian thought, apologetics kind of thing. We do that through our podcast, The Gospel Underground. So that's a little bit of what I do. I'm also the Acts 29 U.S. South Central Assessment Director. I do that probably with about 25% of my time or so working directly with church planters kind of in the middle of the country.
Gotcha. You got a couple different things going. And man, I can tell you used to be a wrestler. Like you've kept it up, dude. You're looking good.
Well, I have teenage daughters, 18, 16, so I'm trying to remain a little bit intimidating in life. But my 14-year-old son is getting his game together, so we're gonna be in good shape.
Okay, all right. Is he following in father's footsteps?
More in mothers. My wife was an NCAA champion in women's soccer at the University of North Carolina, and she's fantastic. And one of the things that our family is always around the soccer pitch. So, but my son does wrestle. He's soccer first, wrestling second,
Okay.
and yeah, super proud of that little guy.
Okay, nice, man. And where are you located?
I'm located in Blacksburg, Virginia, which is a college town right next to Virginia Tech. I live about a mile from that campus. We were in ministry here for some time before, and my wife had our first two kids here. She had friends here. So when we transitioned from New Jersey, we moved here. It's a good location. I travel a lot, or used to. So the location, we could be location agnostic a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's close to my wife's mom and dad, which we had never been close to geographically for almost over 20 years. So
Okay.
kind of based out of here in the Power of Change Worldwide Shed Quarters. I have a pretty sweet setup in the shed, but you guys probably noticed my really good camera keeps shutting off for some reason, so I pivoted to a different camera.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. That's fine. Right. Tell us. So we had was that last week that we had Jamie Ice on? No, that was 2 weeks ago. So Jamie's a guy here in Fort Worth who's a local small business owner. We were just talking with him about how COVID-19 has affected his business. And I know we weren't planning to talk about this, but as you mentioned, getting speaking engagements canceled and stuff like that. Any advice that you'd have for people who are having to pivot right now, things that you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very extensive itinerant kind of schedule, so I had 7 events canceled, that I was looking forward to, that either I was kind of keynoting or training people.
Wow.
And so that was significant. Now, thankfully, my board and we structured our funding structure such that we weren't dependent on, say, like speaker fees or honorariums in any way. In fact, one of the things that I do is I don't charge. I'll come for whatever, high fives, thank you, Jesus, big checks, whatever.
Beans and rice
the
and Jesus
financial-
Christ.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We do what we do. So our funding wasn't affected. It was more I had to pivot in terms of time.
Okay.
A lot of there's a lot of prognosticators in terms of what it's going to look like the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
I do have some events that are booked for the fall that obviously we're holding with an open hand, but we're doing some content plays anyway. We were building our podcast over the last 2 years, and so I've been investing more time there. And I'm also going to be making some kind of salty evangelistic videos that I can send to my friends and put online as well, 2-minute kind of things. So we're pivoting in that way into some content that we were intending to do. It just kind of hastened the day, so to speak. We're not flying anywhere.
Tell me about it, dude. We didn't have a podcast studio in here 2 months ago, and look at us now. We're living large in here now, man.
Got the Shure SM7Bs. It looks like those are great.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, hey, man, tell us, and Joel, you hop in here at any point. But tell us what advice you would give to somebody who says, I have a heart for my neighbors. I have a heart for the lost. I want to be out helping people. I want to be out sharing the gospel, and I just have no idea how to do it, given the CDC guidelines and the government restrictions. What are you telling to people who are asking you questions like that right now?
The good thing about that, guys, is that I'm asking myself that question because obviously I'm not going to a college campus to preach or anything like that. And so one of the things that I've done in training churches, this is a training I did with the Paradox crew maybe a year or a year and a half ago, might have been right before your time.
Okay.
Is that I have a framework that I really believe in. It's not just a technique, but it's a framework. It's kind of funny. We use the term Asseldar, which came out of
I wasn't sure where you were going with that.
Yeah. I actually did a training for a church in New York City about how to thoughtfully engage years ago, and I was writing down all the things I wanted to share and was hoping it would come up with like some sweet acrostic or something, and it just didn't. So I wrote it down and it said Asseldar. I was like, well, that sounds like Asgard or like Thor taking names, and so or going to the Middle Earth and defeating orcs. So I was like, I'm going to keep that. And so it's a simple framework that I've lived over the years, both with leading college students to the Lord, church planting in skeptical places, but also just average normal believers seeking to share the gospel with others. And so it stands for live amongst people, share your life, share the gospel, listen to people, deconstruct. That's a little tricky. Give good answers and repeat over time in life. So the challenge that I've had, obviously, when you're not among people, how do you do that? How do you share your life when our lives are intentionally separated right now for public health concerns? And then how do I share the gospel in that? So not only is it a question I've been asked, but it's a question I'm asking of myself. And so one of the things I want to remind everyone is that God's purpose is right. He's bringing people to himself from the nation of the world. His intention is this glory will cover the earth as the waters cover the seas. In the end of time, he's going to have a kingdom that will have some people from every tribe, tongue, and language in it.
Yeah.
Now, the means by which he accomplishes that, right, is just fascinating to me. I became a Christian when I was 20. My dad's a skeptical guy, an atheist guy. And so when I became a Christian, I was shocked to think that God had entrusted this global, historical, universal enterprise of bringing in his people from the whole world to us, right? I was like, wow, I mean, I'm in that seat now. I get to play in this game. I'm not sitting the bench. And so it's a privilege to be involved as the means God uses, right, to share the gospel with other people. And so but one of the things that people forget that the most evangelistically effective thing is not Billy Graham crusades or a certain trick or the four spiritual laws. Well, all the great things have been created throughout history. But the most effective evangelistic thing that we can do is disciple and lead kids to the Lord. So one of the things I've done is focused for years on working with my own family. My son on Good Friday broke into tears, and he's almost 14. He wants to be baptized. So that was encouraging. So moms and dad, don't neglect that, right? Don't neglect if you got kids around you in your home, you're like, man, I'm keep cooped up with these kids. Well, invest in their spiritual life. And so for us, that's meant virtual church together. We've started something called FFT, Family Focused Time, 3 times a week, where we're investing spiritually in one another. My kids are older, so it's a 1-0 thing, not a 4-year-old thing. And then we have Sunday meetings. And so our kids are thriving spiritually right now. And that's something I never want to skip when we do evangelism training. But if you're 20, you're in a city, or you're a young person trying to share the gospel with others, here's some of the things I've been doing. I've been trying to live the same framework. How do I live amongst non-Christians even while I'm social distancing during a pandemic? And this is a similar advice I would give if we weren't in that time, that non-Christians, Christians can share similar lifestyles, habits, and certain things, hobbies even. And so for me, I've been trying to invest in people I connect with naturally through other means. For me, that's amateur wrestling. I know that's kind of been my past. So I'm careful about what I want to say here, because there's particular individuals that I am sowing into life with. And so one guy I'm having that on my podcast in a few weeks, another guy I'm doing mailbox drops where I, sending like barbecue tools, because we both like that, to building relationship. We've also purchased, we've purchased a case of this book, Where's God in Coronavirus World. So we're doing drops to friends. My teenage friends are doing drops of these to friends as well, because it's very clear and people are asking questions. So the among part is hard, but you can text people. You can do some mailbox dropping. You can get in life with people. And I think sharing those overlapping interests creates a context where you can ask simple questions that lead to other things. So
absolutely.
And in that, man, I was like, yeah.
No, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, people are really, really open now that I'm experiencing.
Okay.
To say, hey, how are you doing? Our church is praying for people. Do you have any needs? I've found people really open to that today. Even like people that aren't. Even my dad, who's an atheist still, right? He's in a assisted living home. And at the end of our call with him the other day, as a family, say, hey, Dad, we're praying for us. And he got emotional in that moment because he's aware of his own soul in a different way. So don't be afraid to say, hey, can I pray for you? What do you need? Our church is meeting local business needs. What can we do for you? Yeah. Combining first responders. Our church is doing gift cards here locally from local businesses to give to first responders. And those kinds of things, there's an openness. We've had 2 friends, one in Texas, one in Florida, who people invited to their live stream have committed their lives to Jesus. Wow. So if your church, right, if your church is, Yeah, let's see. I know Jim is. Jim is friend. Yeah, I could bring somebody before Jim who's really, really lost, right?
Yes.
And say, hey, join. Hey, if you don't have anything spiritually going on, check this out on Sunday. There's an openness to that now as well.
That's awesome. And Joel, jump in here. But first of all, Jordan, will you link up that book, Where is God in a Coronavirus World? Will you put that in the comments so people can check that out if they want to? Who is that by, Reid?
It's by a guy named John Lennox, who's he's an Irish guy. Who's an Oxford mathematician emeritus. He's an older gentleman. He feels like your old uncle. So he's like hugely fatherly and spooky smart. So this is only 62 pages, but I found it very, very helpful. And as I said, our family, we're giving them away like crazy right now because it answers the questions like what God and viruses, that kind of stuff, but also has a huge pastoral and gospel tone towards the end to remember eternity. Because I think the worst thing that we could do is just like say, man, this is hard. We don't want to talk to people about spiritual things because everybody's worrying about paychecks like we all are, worrying about, serious issues. But because of that, there's a real openness in this time to say, hey, what is your life founded upon to friends? Now, if you don't have any non-Christian friends now, obviously it's a hard deal. Maybe that's a time of openness of prayer. Lord, how do I get my life overlapping with people outside of church world?
Yeah.
And look, I found that like if you're into technology, if you're into gaming, if you're into sports, if you're into barbecuing food, if you're into marching band, if you're into going to rave parties reasonably, whatever it might be, there are groups and communities I think that Christians and non-Christians, without getting worldly or sinning, can get our lives around others. And I think that's a challenge for church leadership, particularly if folks are not in a habit of doing that, right? But looking at the things that you love that other people might overlap with, and then just engaging communities so you can make connections, real human connections, not like, hit lists for Jesus or something goofy like that, but real friendship with people, so that when the opportunities like pandemics hit, like, hey, how are you really doing? Man, I've been anxious myself. Are you struggling with anxiety? And just opening these questions with friends through text messaging or Zooming or whatever it might be, I find it's very helpful and allows people to ask questions of us.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I really like the way that you started with the family, right? I think that so many times we can look at, when we think mission-minded, we think outside the house, and we forget that we have people in our house that we should probably start investing in discipling and growing from there. And then the intentionality that goes or that starts afterwards, looking at, hey, how can I connect with other people? And I think that so many times, even me as a staff person, you get in your own little bubble, right, of Christian people, and it's like you're so disconnected so many times. And so I really like that you said, hey, let's be intentional about finding similarities where we can connect with other people as well, and just build true relationships, not just relationships that are just like a hit list for Jesus, like you said, right? So, man, that was really good. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it's an amazing. We all look at the statistics and people trying to predict whether or not young people are going to leave the church temporarily, leave the church forever, become nuns and never return, right? And by that I mean NONES,
Yes.
not going to the convent, so to speak.
Although that's on the rise too.
Yeah. Hey, man, that'd probably be a good thing for the world. So in reality, we're all concerned about young people if we don't start right with authentic faith lived out together with the next generation, right? My dad didn't raise me with any kind of books other than be tough, be smart, dominate people. Okay, great. Becoming a Christian, I said, man, I need to really learn how to be a father, because it seems like in the Bible it's very important for fathering to take place both within families but also within churches. And so I want my kids to know the Lord. I mean, in fact, when I made a transition from New Jersey to the ministry I'm doing now, it was very hard. I love New Jersey. I never anticipated leaving. We just had the 10-year celebration with that church. We love those folks. They're our biggest supporters as well of our ministry. But I remember wondering, hey, what do I really want for the rest of my life? And three things. I want to be friends with my wife, right? I don't want to be old and like kind of crusty, sleeping on a couch. I actually want to be friends with my wife, right? I want my kids to know me. to really know me, and I want to maintain a robust spiritual faith in Jesus till I'm dead. And for me, simplifying that, brings the most powerful evangelistic force in the history of the world, the family, into play. Now, the thing is, my family wasn't Christian, so what about me? I was 20 when I converted. That came through a gentleman, through a sports world and connection, stepping into my life and speaking the gospel to me in a way I could understand. And so both and don't neglect, don't just watch, we're almost, through all the Restaurant Impossible episodes with Robert Irvine in our family, but don't just do that. Carve out these times to make investments, answer your kids' questions, make your kids' faith robust. So when they ask, hey, what about viruses and God doesn't love people, look at all these dead people. If you're not engaging those kind of conversations, we need to solidify and strengthen our faith for our children. And then also, we view our kids also together now. They're older. They're running things in a public high school before the pandemic. It's like, how can you reach out to your friends? And then I'm equipping them. Like one of my middle daughter has an atheist friend who they were texting back and forth, like crazy long, like hour and a half texting sessions. And she's coming back and forth to me saying, Dad, what is this? How would you answer this? And together, beautiful time for me and my daughter, we're answering and give a reason for our hope to this young girl who's kind of set adrift now with very great uncertainty.
Reid, I love hearing about your personal, not conviction story. What is that called? When you became a Christian. I love hearing about that. Conversion story. There it is. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, evangelism, sharing the gospel, can feel intimidating. So you mentioned that guy did it in a way that was easy for you to understand. Tell us about that, and then just speak to the person who says, man, I just feel freaked out to even get started with this.
Yeah. One of the reasons I think a lot of people get freaked out is that we can unfortunately assume that everyone who's a Christian is the same and has the same role in evangelism. Now, I view evangelism as a communal project, right? The whole church is representing the kingdom of God in certain places and preaching and sharing the gospel. Some have, I love talking to non-Christian people. I mean, I just love it. Some people, it paralyzes them, but they would love to create a community that's very hospitable, very kind, very generous. And those two people combined, the evangelistically hearted guy who wants to bring folks into a place where they're actually loved and cared about becomes a powerful force together. So I want to say that right away. Obviously, I was with a group called Athletes in Action, which is part of the artist formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, where we were kind of like, hey, it's Crew Global now.
Yep.
Hey, everyone has to do this all the same way almost. And I think that intimidates a lot of people because they think they got to run down folks on the street that don't know Jesus, and then kind of give them the sales and marketing pitch for 5 minutes and then dip on them. That's not at all what I would suggest. Now, the guy that befriended me, he came and spoke to our wrestling team. He was a baseball player, which, we like baseball, but we don't think they're like tough guys or anything. But this man was kind and gentle. He asked us, hey, he was interested in speaking about God, and I never said yes to that, never. But I just happened to be walking behind a baseball field on the campus of UNC, and this guy was there, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I jump in the bushes? What do I do? The Bible guy is coming. And he just said, hey, how are you doing? I heard you're studying physics. That's got to be hard in an athletic program that's as high level as this, but yet doing academic work of that rigor. How is that for you? And he just asked me a question like that. I was like, wow, that's a kind question. It's really hard, man. I'm pretty stressed. I'm tired. Hey, where does God fit into your story? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I believe about that. I'm not sure I even believe in God. Hey, would you care to get together and talk about that sometime? And I was like shaking my head no inside, but said, all right, yeah. And then just his patience, listening to me. I think listening, and that's the L in Alcildar, listening is an underestimated tool in witnessing, because witnessing to people involves speaking. But if we're not listening to that person, we don't even know what God's doing in their life, what God has done in their story, what real things that they might have, even the way to approach the gospel with them. If I'm talking to a guy that doesn't have a dad and he's pissed about it, I'm probably going to say, hey, man, that's really hard. That really hurts. I kind of get that. But what if we could have a dad that cared and it was better and deeper? And even listening well creates the approach even that we might talk to someone in wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a one-size-fits-all model, I think, for a while, and I think we're learning about the importance
Yeah.
of empathy and asking good questions. And Joel, I know we've even been talking about that with our city groups.
Yeah, I think that I grew up that way as well, right? Having like, hey, this is the first question that you ask somebody, right? Like, this is your go-to line or whatnot. And there was just this disconnect because right after you were done talking with the person, it's like, okay, cool, bye. And it's just like, wait, what just happened? There was no relationship. There was just there was no relational connection with the individual. So I appreciate you highlighting this is relational. It's the person that that approached you started with a concern about you, like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Right, and and I think that's key. So yeah, man, I agree.
There's training that I've received and that I've given to others in the past that begin with certain kinds of questions and that literally flow chart from there. What if they say this, you say that, they say this, and I used to get crazy about that stuff. I was like, but this is not the way people are, and if we do this a certain way, we might be a bit off-putting. Now that said, there is a place for training wheels, right? Learning to ride a bike, or I guess they got these little bikes that they just kind of scoot around on right now before they get to real big bikes now. My kids are too old to have done those. I don't even know what they're called, but my buddy was talking about them the other day. So there's a place for training. I do think people need to know a basic gospel outlined well.
Yeah.
And then some, and some of the other training I do, gospel themes that are in the Bible, right, that are available to us, right? If you got an earthy farming guy, they're sowing seeds and stuff. There's darkness, light, there's family themes, there's judicial themes, right? Substitutionary atonement. There's these themes that are available to us, and in wisdom and prayer, we can follow God in these conversations with friends to what they need. And it's all biblical truth stuff. I'm not saying, hey, hide the gospel or hide, sin and righteousness and judgment. I'm saying speak it into this person's story and the way God is leading it. And that takes time and wisdom to develop that, but it's worth it in the end. And that's what I'm trying to do with my own kids, to teach them how to engage with, the non-Christians, piss them off or say crazy things to them or judge their faith wrongly, or the person that seems needy, or, they have all kind of friends that they're trying to witness to. And we have conversations in our home. Hey, how's this? Maybe try this kind of question with her. She might be open to that.
Yeah.
What would you say to people that maybe some of their fear is that they don't have the right answer, right? Like they would ask them a question, they're like, maybe I don't have an answer, so I don't even want to engage right now.
Yeah. I do youth apologetics conferences now, which I do one every year in Kentucky. We've done it annually for 4 years. I love it. And one of the things I always say to them and then to myself, not one of us knows everything. We're not trying to even approach the level of the knowledge that God has. There are questions we will have that we won't know the answer to. There are questions our friends will have. The important thing is to learn a way of life that processes those questions in a certain way with others. In other words, there's nothing wrong to say, I don't know why viruses exist in the creation of God. They do. I'd love to investigate that question with you. Here's an episode of the Gospel Underground I listened to that we're doing that tomorrow, actually, that virus question.
Nice.
Check that out. So to have humility, to say, I don't know, but then a willingness to actually seek the Lord, seek his word, seek knowledge, to answer our own questions, I think is a first step that solidifies confidence, and then in our conversations with others. So it's never wrong to say you don't know. It's lazy to not care about a person's sincere question, right? If we listen well and we hear someone's sincere question, we want to investigate with us. And you and I identify questions that are just nonsense that people are using just to divert the issue. People do that a lot. And you really know someone well, you can say, hey, man, that's just mess you're saying. You don't really care about that,
Yep.
I had a friend years ago that I met in a philosophy class named John, who was an atheist. He converted through cancer and the witness of kind friends, and he's with the Lord now. But John used to always ask me these really complex, nonsensical, intellectual questions just to get it off his back. I was like, no, that's BS, man. You're not really facing this question seriously. You're just trying to ask this to divert it for a month so we can go read on this other nonsense. And so I think wisdom helps us know, hey, this is a question that really troubles someone, or it's a smokescreen.
Mm-hmm. One final question for you before we see if we've got any on Facebook. I moved to Fort Worth from Denver just over 6 months ago, and in Denver, the culture up there is a little more of, hey, whatever you want to believe, that's cool. I may be spiritual, but I'm not religious. My God is in the mountains, kind of a thing. That's you have to do a different approach there than you have to in Texas, where I'm finding more of people say I go to church or I believe in God, and what that means is they go twice a year and they sort of nominally assent to there's probably a God, but he doesn't have much impact in my life, even though they're not saying that, right? So
as long as things are going well for me and my job and my family, then I'm good.
Right, exactly. And so as I've been engaging my neighbors for 6 months in my neighborhood, I'm having trouble figuring out how to cut through that a little bit. What would you tell me?
Yeah, well, this is a personal question too, because I went from 8 years in kind of campus ministry, reaching out to 20-year-olds who didn't know the Lord, to I got recruited and headhunted to a mega church in Nashville. This was from 04 to 08, and when I was there. Now, my answer eventually was I got to move to the Northeast to get out of here. But with Bible-y Belt kind of places, there is this kind of facade. And so we have to crack that with people.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that takes time. It really, but yeah, here's a commonality in American culture. People are coming and going to their jobs and getting in their house, and they're not engaging in just kind of neighborhood community easily. So, if you're involved with a neighborhood that does have community associations, do that. If you see people in your neighborhood, like our neighborhood here in Virginia, which is more Bible Belt place than I was in New Jersey. My wife does such a good job. She's on the Facebook community for our neighborhood. She does stuff with these people in our neighborhood much more than I do. She's amazing at it. So if you can join the neighborhood association, if you can get out and walk your dog, or I don't have a dog, but get out around people. I think you have to get this kind of, Aaron Patrick used to call this paying relational rent with people. You just spend time. And then slowly, the problem is we don't like to shift conversations to uncomfortable things with people. And so I think we just have to be willing to do that. And if people trust you enough, they're okay with you being like, oh, he's a spiritual guy, he's asking me these questions.
Right.
With lost church people, though, you might have to get really direct. Bring them to a gym, get very direct with them, or your preacher or something, because they might visit church with you, but they're going to think it's all okay until a crisis hits. And that's why I think there's openness of life when things are that we normally trust. We trust our idols deeply until they fall before us, and when they fall before us, we ask questions we weren't asking before. And so you can pray for people, that are facing different.
And I think a lot of those idols are falling right now in this pandemic time. So I appreciate you coming on, man. We've only got one question from Facebook, and it's from your friend Jim Essian, and he just wants to know, since he couldn't be here with us today, who would win in a street fight, you or him?
Well, Jim, I mentioned earlier, Jim is a baseball player.
Yeah.
So what happens in street fights with wrestlers and baseball players.
He's a pretty jack.
Jim is like skinny Jim now. He's like not as big as he used to be. Probably healthier though. He's a lot healthier.
Oh man. Well, I'll pass that along to him.
I would fight Jim in the street because I love him.
Man, thank you. Hang on. We had a last second question come in, so we'll do this and then you can sign off and I'll get us out of here. This is from a guy named Tyser. He's here in the studio with us. He says, do you hold to a presuppositional apologetic method or more classic apologetic method?
That's a good question.
When I'm finishing up a very, very long seminary degree, it'll be 20 years, not continuously, but 20 years from first class to last class. I'll graduate in May. My degree is in applied apologetics. I think that those intramural debates are helpful so that people can learn about the method that is not their pet project. So I think presuppositionalism, which is kind of using an indirect method of argumentation, is wonderful for talking for people. It's basically helping people unpack their own insufficiency of their worldview so that they will see the emptiness of the nest and ask, well, what now? And then you preach the gospel. Classical apologetics has developed arguments for, say, the existence of God from reason and philosophy. I think someone needs to have a very full tool belt of arguments, like, why do you believe in God? If somebody asks you that, well, you're okay with answering that. Well, the world exists, and I think that this doesn't happen by chance, and maybe you know a little bit about science in the beginning of the universe, or the nature of people desiring to worship. That kind of sensus divinitatis that Calvin talked about in us seems to be evidence that, man, maybe something's there. The moral nature of the universe, the design we see in things. I don't think it's wrong to talk about those things with people. So I'm what you would call a pragmatic apologist. Most of the times apologetics is taught in seminaries or in formal settings where you kind of go through what role does faith play, what role does reason play, and then you kind of figure that out. Once you figure that out, you say, okay, now I know how I can use arguments or logic, and then I put that in a system, call it evidential, call it classical, presuppositional, and then from within that system, I create arguments to defend the faith or to help other people see the truth of the gospel. I think that's completely backward. I think in 1 Peter, apologetics exists in the context of mission, right? We're always prepared to give a reason for the hope that we have for anyone to ask us, and do so with gentleness and respect. When we do that, we're going to see people's actual questions, and then we can seek answers where we might find them. And then I think in the way of talking to people, what I do in training Asildar is very much presuppositionalist and flow approach, that kind of thing. So start with people, their real questions. Go to the scriptures and to common grace knowledge in the world through the disciplines of knowledge that we have, and then talk to that person about the gospel so that they can see Jesus and not just argue us to death about the problem of evil or about the reliability of Old Testament narratives. We want to start with the person where they are, bring Jesus to bear from the scriptures and from the truth, and then answer their questions that they might have along that journey.
That's awesome, man. Thank you again for coming on. People can find you powerofchange.org. And then what's the name of your podcast again?
Gospelunderground.org.
Gospelunderground.org. Okay, great. So if you like...
And where podcasts are found, if you want
Yes.
We talk about everything because our podcast is about the overlap of the church and culture, so we talk about everything.
Awesome. Okay, well, if you want to hear more on gospel and culture from Reid, then go check out his podcast. And man, thanks for coming on. I hope that when this is all over, that we can link up again in person and get you out here. And man, blessings to you and your family. Stay safe.
Well, we love the Paradox. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
See you, man. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the live podcast from the Paradox Church. Joel, thanks for coming on. Yeah. As always, guys, love hearing from you. And so james@theparadoxchurch.com, you can shoot me an email. We're bringing guests on the show. And so if there's somebody you want to hear from, send me an email and let me know. If there's a topic that you want to hear addressed, then I'll search my network and see who we can bring on. But would love to be answering your questions and giving you all the content that we can while we're at home and keep us united while we're apart. And so love you guys, and we'll see you next week on the TPC podcast.